And we are joined by Democratic Congressional Candidate Nikki Gronli, of course, running again for Congress to represent the state of South Dakota. And Nikki, we appreciate you joining us just one day after the president delivered a very lengthy State of the Union.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, happy to be here and talk about it.
Did you watch all hour and 48 minutes of the State of the Union?
I did. The first part of it, I will say, I was in my car heading where I was going, so I caught a little bit of it on the radio, got inside and got it turned on.
Well, it was a long one. You know, I did a little bit of a hybrid listen slash watch myself. I want to get your takeaways there. What were your big takeaways from his remarks there?
So quite a bit of time was dedicated to calling out Americans who had done some great things. So we had the hockey team that was on there. We had our South Dakotan Royce, I think it was Williams, who was honored with a Medal of Honor, which was great to see. But I didn't feel like there was a lot of substance when we think about the affordability issue and what Americans are feeling on a daily basis.
I want to get your response to some of these remarks. We'll start here just with the opening of his remarks, because you say there wasn't a lot of substance. Now, his messaging, of course, was that this is the golden age of America. We will start here. This is his open.
Members of Congress and my fellow Americans, our nation is back, bigger, better, richer, and stronger than ever before. Less than 5 months from now, our country will celebrate an epic milestone in American history, the 250th anniversary of our glorious American independence. This July 4th, we will mark 2.5 centuries of liberty and triumph, progress and freedom in the most incredible and exceptional nation ever to exist on the face of the earth. And you've seen nothing yet. We're going to do better and better and better. This is the golden age of America.
And get your response to his assessment of how things are going right now for the country.
Well, we know right now that in South Dakota to date, with the ACA premium tax credits that were discontinued, that we've seen about 4,000 South Dakotans that have fallen off the plan. There's concerns that as the year goes on, we'll see more people who decide they can't afford it at this point in time. So we're seeing folks that are losing out on health care. People are still feeling the strain of grocery prices, and we're seeing 6% energy cost rises. That means it's harder to heat your home. So I disagree with the president on this. I think a lot of people are hurting, and we continue to see a split between the wealthiest amongst us and those who are in the middle class and those striving to be in the middle class.
He did address health care last night. I'm curious what you made of his remarks there, because he was touting his plan for health care, ultimately taking aim at the Obamacare program, the Affordable Care Act, also promoting his plan to, instead of provide subsidies, provide direct payments to Americans. Is there any merit to that, in your opinion, or do you like the former system, or the current system, I should say?
Well, so the thing we know about health care is we're truly in this together. Any type of insurance is only successful when you have a pool of people who are really helping each other out, right? Whether it is healthcare, whether it is natural disasters, or even car insurance, those who aren't using it are subsidizing those who are. And when we think about healthcare, we want to have a good pool. We want more Americans in that system, because the healthy people are going to help those who are having to use it. And what we're actually seeing, because of those premium tax credits go away, changes to Medicaid, people are dropping out of health insurance. That's going to help continuing the increased costs for overall insurance. The president has brought up giving folks a few $1,000s to help with health insurance on an annual basis. But for many, especially those who are in small businesses, our farmers and ranchers, they're limited on where they can access their health insurance, and many of them are having to go to the ACA because they're not in a pool or a group insurance like a lot of people get to experience when they're in a larger corporation.
So Democrats last year forced a government shutdown. They were trying to get an extension of those enhanced premium tax credits. What kind of feedback have you heard from South Dakotans? I mean, we are up on that date now. Those subsidies have expired.
Yeah, I think of in Sioux Falls, there is a single mom who she is a cook at a local restaurant, and her premiums went up by $300 a month. She is working, full-time, taking care of her family. $300 a month is a huge change to a budget, and it's really making it tight for her. I've heard from others that are just single individuals who are trying to get by, and when we see those costs go up, it means they have less money to invest back into our economy. We should want to have people with that extra money that helps us go out there and make purchases.
Was there anything that he said last night that you thought did have merit as far as healthcare costs are concerned?
Boy, in the healthcare space, we all agree that we need to find a way to bring prescriptions down. Now, I have not checked out his prescription plan that he's talking about, how that works. I need to do my research on it, but prescriptions definitely can be a tough one for people. I just last week on Friday was talking to a woman who works in the health insurance industry, and she was having to run into the eye doctor because her health insurance provider decided they weren't going to cover her eye drops anymore, her prescription drops. She needed to go in and get it changed up. And those types of just little disruptions can be a big issue in a daily basis when all of a sudden you're changing your schedule, you're canceling things off your calendar, and you're going into a doctor because your provider won't cover it.
Okay, I want to move here because there was a lot to cover as far as that State of the Union goes, but we will move on to the SAVE Act. You heard President Trump asking Congress directly yesterday as he was in their chamber to pass the SAVE Act. This would require people to prove that they're U.S. citizens through documentation to register for federal elections. We'll go to his comments and then we will get your response on all this.
And even the new communist mayor of New York City, I think he's a nice guy, actually. Speak to him a lot. Bad policy, but nice guy. Just said they want people to shovel snow. They got hit hard. Wants them to shovel snow, but if you apply for that job, you need to show 2 original forms of ID and a Social Security card. Yet they don't want identification for the greatest privilege of them all, voting in America. Now it's no good.
So first off, we'll get your response to his comments there, and then just your thoughts on the SAVE Act.
Well, when we think about going in and voting, the big concern is whether or not people currently have the right documentation even to be able to vote. And a good example of that is Legislative Coffee in Sioux Falls, South Dakota last Saturday. Jack Colbeck and Senator Jamie Smith were there. And Jamie Smith had renewed his driver's license in December. It does not say U.S. citizen. Representative Jack Colbeck had done his in January, and the ID says U.S. citizen. And so when we think about the SAVE Act and the required documentation, there's some disagreement on would Jamie's ID allow him to vote. It doesn't say U.S. citizen.
And that's been a big hang-ups because, to my understanding, if the ID doesn't say U.S. citizen, then you'd be falling back to a passport or birth certificate.
Exactly.
Or some sort of other documentation, but those would be the main two for most people.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, they may not have a passport at all. Not everybody travels abroad. And then with your birth certificate, I've seen discussions too about whether or not the certificate is the right one, whether it was stamped, notarized, because a lot of folks, especially I'd say my age group and maybe in the 60s, their parents would get almost like this nice looking birth certificate that was frameable, and a lot of people have thought that is what they need, but that's not actually the notarized stamped version that they may need to go get. And for women, there's going to be that disconnect like myself, who I was born Nikki Mersch, and now I am Nikki Gronli, and my birth certificate and my ID are going to have two different last names. It does not say a marriage license as part of the SAVE Act is a piece of that identification. So there's confusion and there's concern that women would have to take extra steps to be able to vote. The other thing to keep in mind is those documents cost money. So who's going to be hurt by it? Anyone who those expenses are unnecessary and they're going to have to pay for it. You could consider it similar to a poll tax. And it's going to allow those in the higher income levels to vote, while someone who doesn't have the money for those may not choose to go through it and get that. I would love to see, if we are going to do something like this, that we make a standard government ID that everybody's able to get and they don't have to pay for it.
Do you see a deal forming there? Do you see there being any place where Republicans and Democrats could come together on this? I think people agree with the concept of ensuring that only U.S. citizens are voting in federal elections. But it's the how, right, that I think is the hang up here?
Yeah. I definitely see that yes, there could be compromise on this, and that is a potential. I've seen comments that the Senate's not going to take it up at all, that maybe it's not a priority right now. I'd say the other concern in that, and maybe it's the reason that the Senate isn't taking it up currently, when we have an election coming up, at what point in time would it come into play? And would there be a bunch of folks that have to suddenly scramble to make sure they have the right IDs to be able to vote by June 2nd and in November? It could really be a mess.
Let's get into the president's trade agenda. Last night, we saw him touching on the Supreme Court decision on his tariffs. They ultimately ruled against his broad tariffs. He did push forward and decide that he's going to enact tariffs. Even so, 10% globally. Those are in effect for 150 days unless Congress takes action. I do want to go to this clip if we can. He's essentially saying the countries that the U.S. has formed deals with are happy with the deals and that they want to keep these deals in place. We'll go to that clip.
Knowing that the legal power that I, as president, have to make a new deal could be far worse for them, and therefore they will continue to work along the same successful path that we had negotiated before the Supreme Court's unfortunate involvement. So despite the disappointing ruling, these powerful, country-saving, it's saving our country, the kind of money we're taking in.
So on tariffs, should Congress be pushing back against the president's trade agenda? And do you believe countries are overall happy and with the trade deals that these have secured?
Well, we know that Congress has the right to taxation. And I really think that we need that check on the executive power at this point in time to deal with tariffs. We still don't have a resolution on this because the president has jumped to a different form of tariff, 15% that he's going to do across the board using a different method. We'll see if that ends up, he'll have 6 months that he can do that. If not, he needs congressional authorization. So we have that situation. Now we've also seen immediately businesses like FedEx are going to sue to get the dollars back that they lost in tariffs. There are other businesses that are going to hop in and sue the federal government to get that money back. That's going to be a real mess, and it also means if that money is returned to them, depending on what the outcome is, that we could be out a whole bunch of money that was claimed through the tariffs, and we have a budget shortfall, right? Or we're adding to our deficit, depending on where they decide to draw that money from. So that is very concerning that this was done in what the Supreme Court has declared is an illegal way, and the federal government could have to pay back several businesses. I also know that a couple of members of Congress have put in a bill saying the money has to go back to those who paid the tariffs. Now, on the national scale, I honestly have not followed very much how other countries are feeling about this, but we are seeing Europe, Canada, and some of these relationships form, Canada and China, completely ignoring the United States and taking us out of the loop, which is concerning. We don't want to lose trade partners. When we think about how our deficit is growing, the way to deal with a deficit is to make sure that we are growing our economy, and it's rather stagnant right now.
So I'm curious, you're running opposition party to the party in charge of everything right now in Washington, D.C., if you're hearing from farmers and ranchers on those tariffs and how they've affected them.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is that those who had soybeans last year and maybe had to sit on them, keep them stored, or didn't have a good price for their soybeans are the ones that are really hurting. Talked to some in the corn grower area. They're doing a little bit better. They've had markets, even though a bushel of corn is down in value. They're doing okay. For those soybean farmers, what this means is they maybe weren't able to pay back some of the operating costs that they had last year, and banks are actually saying they're not going to lend operating costs this year. Just recently had a ag town hall up in Britain, South Dakota, with a bunch of ag producers. And we heard the story from one ag producer who was trying to figure out how to help save his neighbor's farm. The bank has said, we cannot give you an operating loan because of the financial situation he ended up in at the end of last year.
Is part of it trade volatility as well? Is that what he was saying?
Yeah, exactly. We lost a lot of market, and it's devastating to a farmer when you have high input costs. You plot out what you're going to get for the year, and you're hoping for the best at the end of the season. And unfortunately for our farmers, they are often in a cycle of debt. That operating loan is happening every year. And I really think we need to look at that. We need to work with ag lenders. We need to work with Farmers Bureau, Farmers Union, try and think about how we do that differently, because our farmers are just getting by.
And President Trump next month is set to meet in China with Chinese leaders. What would be your message to the president, especially as it pertains to soybean farm, or the soybean economy and the soybean trade deal between the U.S. And China? To my knowledge, the deal last year was about half the normal amount that would go out. Going forward, to my knowledge, unless anything has changed, it's about the minimum.
Exactly. And the thing I would want the president to discuss with them is coming to a good agreement and getting our soybeans back out in that market. We know that the world population is in Southeast Asia, India, China. There's a large number of people there. There's a great opportunity for soybeans, which is why, years ago, Governor Dugard worked so hard to get those trade partners. We need that back. We need it back badly.
Okay, let's get into campaigning. Democrats right now, they've got a big midterm coming up, a big opportunity to possibly retain some power here in Washington, D.C. What do you think they need to hone in on in order to have those races go in their favor?
I think in the past we've seen some elections where people are often elected based on charisma and some things like that. We need to make sure we're talking real issues and solutions. When I visit with folks and they're telling me how Medicare is difficult to stay on, and they're a senior and they're having to go into the doctor every few months to make sure they can stay on the plan, we need to say, I want to address that. We need to work with them on what that policy could look like, and we need to bring real solutions to the table. When we talk about affordability, we need to be able to sharing with them the steps that we will take to ensure affordability. And I've talked in the past before about the tariff situation. Tariffs cost the average family between $1,000 and $600 last year out of their family budget. We need to address the trade issue. We need to make sure that we're bringing prices down so that families aren't hurting so badly.
Back to tariffs real quick. You know, you talk about these lawsuits. Do you think if this money was to be paid back, some of it needs to trickle down to everyday people?
I would agree with that. I know that's going to be a big lift, right, to figure that out. But I would
because
love
legally
to see
it's
it.
the companies, right, that are technically
Right,
paying them.
Right. And then that cost is getting passed on. But a lot of those businesses did start last year putting kind of line items on their receipts showing how much of it was tariff. So it'd be interesting. It could be a heavy lift, but if it were able to go back to the families who are impacted, I would love to see it.
Okay, let's go way out because people are already talking about this, the next presidential campaign. Right now, when you look at the field of Democrats, have you chosen anybody who you think, we'll say it, has the riz? You said they shouldn't run on the charisma, but who's got it?
You know, I honestly have not thought about it at all. And I think if you think about right now, this moment in time, how quickly things are changing, how often do you have to shift your news story because something else is breaking or happening? I think that's a long ways out right now. And we don't know with the midterms exactly what that looks like, who gets into office, what is the face of Congress after November. We could see a lot of changeover. And part of that is people not running again. And part of that is we could see a lot of seats turned over. I'm interested to see a year from now where we're sitting as an economy. Have we worked out any of these tariff deals? And I think that will go into impacting my decision in the long term.
So when it comes to choosing a candidate, my question would be, who should the Democrats choose to be successful in mid-America? I'm going to throw my own state under the bus here. I'm from California. So typically when we see national Democratic candidates, they come from one of the two coastlines. If they're looking to succeed with rural Democrats, here in the middle of America, what value should they be looking for?
Well, I think we need to get back to worrying about working class people. We need to worry about the middle class, and if there's still a ladder for those who are in lower income jobs to make it to the middle class. A lot of people are concerned about whether you can even have the American dream anymore when we look at things like housing, et cetera. So it needs to be somebody who values the everyday American who is working hard in a job and striving for that middle class. They need to be able to speak to those who are our hard workers and support that dream. We need to get back to it.
Do you think Democrats have a strong vision right now for housing affordability? I would argue with young people, that is one of the biggest issues. It's on all their minds. It's kind of the tale of two cities across America because you got older generations, they've bought homes, they live in their homes. You got younger people, some of them not even younger anymore. They're becoming old renters. You know, they started off as young renters.
And I love this topic because I have been talking to young folks in their mid-20s, and there are some who are like, I don't know if I will ever own a home. And I think how devastating to have that thought of what's going on. We've seen that the average age now of someone buying a home for the first time is 40 years old.
That makes me feel good, I just want to say. I'm still I still got 8 years to go, apparently.
So, but what I'm seeing from a bunch of different angles is programs to make it easier to buy a home. But the thing we need to address is we are 7 million homes short of the demand for housing. What we need to do is think about how we get affordable homes, starter homes, and get those back in there. That is where we start to allow our younger generations to be able to own a home.
Bringing up that supply to match the demand.
Yes. And I think there are a variety of ways you can do that. And sometimes we're not thinking creatively about the different ways you can create homes. I've explored precast housing, where they are actually doing what you can run multiple precast house walls all at once, bring them in, set them up 8 at a time. And these are really energy efficient homes, they're low maintenance homes, and then if you want to twist that further, looking at things like a hempcrete product where you actually could use an agricultural product to make the homes. So I think we need to think creatively about what the potential is of different types of housing that can be put up quickly, affordably, and how do we incentivize that? How do we make sure, and it sounds like a great manufacturing plant, doesn't it? That something new that could be set up and somebody is able to bring back more manufacturing and at the same time have homes.
Have you thought at all about AI policy, and do you think Congress has taken enough action on AI at this point? It's one of those emerging technologies that seems like it's rapidly becoming part of our lives faster than I think we all want to accept.
You know, on the AI piece, it's one of those things, it's going so quickly, and I think there are benefits and I think there are drawbacks. I feel like that is one of those topics that I'd love to say I have an answer for, but I need to spend more time with experts on it. I've heard about some of the things that they're doing in the medical area, which is a great use for it, and being able to solve issues that patients are having. Another one that I heard about recently was talking about a child with autism who was nonverbal, and he's using AI to communicate with his parents, and it's opened up this relationship they never had before. But on the other end, things I would want to address from a policy perspective, when you have AI being used to make nude photos of young people, children, women, and extorting, you know, young people, that is wrong.
And we have
It's
seen the
very
Attorney General
concerning.
here in
Yeah.
South Dakota take action on that.
Yeah, it's very concerning. And I think at the federal level, we should be making sure those things are not happening in the AI space, and we're putting a stop to it.
My other question would just be economic policy, though. I think one of the big questions is what kind of job replacement are we looking at with AI? That is the big elephant in the room, right? When it comes to AI, we talk about AI as being a race, a technological race, but I'm wondering if you see it also as a political race to develop the best policies around this.
Yeah, like I said, with AI, it's hard to detect exactly what it's going to do. When we think about it in the medical field, there is still nothing that replaces an experienced doctor, researcher, nurse who is also looking at the human aspect of it and not just basing it on what readout AI gave you. And so I think it goes back to what we saw at the beginning of the internet. There was a lot of concern that the internet was going to eliminate a lot of jobs. There were people that were concerned about its potential, and we don't yet know what it's going to bring on. But I do want to make sure when we think about AI, like I said, there's that exploitation piece. I want to make sure it's not being used for criminal activity. Those are highly concerning. When we think about jobs, though, it could be a job creator, too. It's hard to guess.
Have you been watching the data center conversations here in South Dakota? Maybe we'll end there since it's such a light topic. You know, everybody's on board with the same exact thoughts on this. What do you make of the conversation right now at the state legislature on data center? I mean, the big battle seems to be over whether or not they should get tax rebates, right, to come here to South Dakota. You got some arguing that by not offering rebates on the equipment inside, they're finding other states that will offer those rebates, and they're setting up shop there. We're missing out on those economic opportunities. Others don't believe we should be giving these major corporations a giant tax break, essentially, is the way they see it. How do you fall on this issue?
So there are data centers that we're all relying on and we need. There are data centers that are taking care of our banking, our universities, our hospital information, our cybersecurity, and our regular EMT services and the things that our sheriff's departments rely on, right? Absolutely necessary. But then we also have data centers that are doing cryptocurrencies, and they are using large amounts of energy, and they are using water, and that's, I think, where people have the most concern. Everybody understands there's some of this that it's going to have to happen, but when we see places like Virginia that have had their energy costs go up because of the large number of data centers that have been put in, and they maybe weren't prepared, they didn't have regulation, and they've popped up, that has been where people are concerned. And they do see it as large tech companies who currently have a whole lot of money getting advantages that other businesses do not get. And I understand that. When it comes to the taxation issue, when else have we given a 50-year benefit to a corporation with no taxes? It seems excessive.
And that ultimately did not get through.
Yeah, it did not get through. Yep. I'm against that. I think when we think of data centers, we need to think about, and it's more of a state issue than it is a federal one. And I say that because we want to think about South Dakota, our energy use, our water use, and what is sustainable for us and what impacts our citizens. So I do encourage our state legislators to dig deeply on this topic and decide what's right for us.
It seems like everybody's on board with making sure that the electric rates aren't passed on to the rate. I wouldn't say maybe not everybody, but the vast majority of lawmakers right now are on board with those concepts.
Yeah.
That the electric rates aren't passed on to consumers, that water isn't overtaxed for these operations. It does just really come down to those tax rebates. Now, you said it, you think it's mostly a state issue, but we'll end it here. Do you think the federal government, and when I say that I mean Congress, should be enacting any laws on this, especially around energy use and water consumption?
I think because of the diverse use of data centers in different states and how far some states are, I think it's tough at this point in time to necessarily
Get in the middle of that?
Get in the middle of it. And I do think that we need to make sure that the federal government is staying out of states' rights and letting South Dakota look at this issue and say what's right for our land, our energy, our water, and our people. I actually don't think the federal government should get into that one.
I know one of the arguments for data centers, so the argument to bring them here, is the amount of tax revenue that proponents say it would bring into the state. They say this would offset property taxes and supply the state with a lot of that tax revenue.
Yeah, and at the same time, we know West River here, we've heard about potential water issues coming, and so it's very reasonable for people to be concerned. You can't drink money. So if we run out of our water, we're in trouble.
Luckily, I live on Michelob Ultras and Diet Coke. Anyways, appreciate you coming on. Democratic Congressional Candidate Nikki Gronli, again, coming in the day after the State of the Union, responding to some clips, and yeah, we appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me, Blake.
All right, thank you, and that will do it for your Political Pulse.